So this was, I think, well, we were going to see more of these. Let's put it this way. Of course, if you don't know what I'm talking about 20 now Labour councillors from the not Leicestershire, Lancashire, sorry, Lancashire area have now sort of quit the party to stand as sort of independent councillors rather than Labour ones. And of course, what is their main push about this? Well, it's about Labour's stance on Gaza. And once again, this echoes my exact criticisms of what I've had with a lot of sort of people at the moment and many of the movements in and around trying to sort of bringing an end to this piece. I want an end to sort of what's going on in Gaza as well. But unfortunately, as I have said, I don't know how many multiple times, the biggest challenges you've got to peace in the Middle East, not only a right-wing Israeli government, but of course Hamas themselves. Like I say, both of those two things probably the biggest impediment when it comes to actually getting some form of peace in the Middle East. Not only that, when people are calling for like an immediate ceasefire, bear in mind we passed one in the UK Parliament. What, 4-5 weeks ago it was? Was there a ceasefire? No, because Hamas and Israel are not watching PMQs to see what on earth, like Rishi Sunak, or what is going on in Parliament. They just don't care. Just last week, we had a resolution passed by the UN Security Council calling for a ceasefire. I don't see a ceasefire happening. And bear in mind, we have already had a ceasefire based on the initial push by people to call for a ceasefire. But again, that ceasefire did not last. So I would really challenge sort of people's assertions that Labour's stance on this and again, it is the use of language here we are talking about, of people saying, oh no, we want an immediate ceasefire versus what the current Labour position is. And I want to remind you what Labour's three demands are in this at the moment. They have, of course, the return of the hostages, that's one, a ceasefire that lasts, and a better future for the Palestinian people. I do not see why that stance would cause people to quit. Because let's go through each one of these. Okay, a return of the hostages. I think that is more than fair and reasonable for anyone to be asking for on this. And this is going to, once again, the core of the problem, that Hamas themselves are going to be a problem when it comes to sort of trying to sort of sort out these problems. It is Hamas who are refusing to sort of release the hostages, even though, again, people will say, oh, but that's the only leverage that they have in this sort of situation. Well, here's the thing. If they release all the hostages, they've sort of released any excuse now that Israel has to do what it is doing in the Gaza Strip. Releasing the hostages is not necessarily going to give them no leverage at all whatsoever. In fact, it would be a big move and would really isolate Israel as well at the moment. So ultimately, that call from Labour for the release of the hostages, again, non-controversial. I think it is pretty fair to call for. And as we said at the moment, would certainly go a long way to not only to sort of isolating Israel more, but would certainly it would give Hamas a lot of a bit more moral high ground at the moment. So yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing to ask for. I think it is good. This, of course, the second one is, quote, the most controversial. And I have to put controversial in air quotes because it's just a simple change of language. Look, we've already seen just a couple of months ago that there was a ceasefire, but it only lasted a couple of days. And remember, this was going off the back of the calls for an immediate ceasefire being pushed by people like we are seeing now. Of course, it did not last. And this is the challenge that we are now sort of seeing. how can we achieve a lasting ceasefire? How can we make sure that it just doesn't just last a couple of days and then, back to square one again? That is important. And I do not see people like this, like these 20 Labour councillors who recently quit, or any of the people who recently quit in quote in how they are upset with the mishandling of this. What else can Labour do on this? Because I will give you some stuff right now Labour could do, but I do not see anyone calling for this as well. So you could recently and really sort of push for Labour to start putting more pressure on America, saying, "Hey, you transferred a lot of weapons recently to Israel. We don't think that's the best idea." We could also call for maybe a something else in that along those lines as well. Um, stopping sort of weapon shipments to sort of Israel. Maybe doing the really good move, which would instead of sending them to sort of Israel, just go and send them to Ukraine instead. The Ukrainians need them a lot more than the Israelis do. But again, it's just one of the few things you could see people like legitimately calling for. But instead, it's just this obsession with immediate ceasefire. Okay, well, how do you do that? How do you go about achieving that? What do you do to assure not only just an immediate ceasefire, but a long-lasting ceasefire that isn't only going to last like 1 or 2 days? And then, of course, finally, I want to get on to the final one, which is a better future for the Palestinian people. And I think that is something that should be very very much be at the forefront of a lot of people's minds when we are seeing sort of calls for this as well. What does the future sort of look like for them? Ultimately, Hamas has to go. Like they should not be allowed to sort of continue in this. I've said it before at the start of this video, and I'll say it again. Two things that are the biggest oppositions to sort of getting peace in the Middle East: right-wing Israeli government, Hamas. Um, Looks like, as you're seeing at the moment in Israel, a lot of big protests against the government. Um, Not necessarily, of course, about what's going on in Gaza, but for a whole range of reasons of stuff going on in Israel. Like I say, Netanyahu probably going to end up in jail because he is a lot of corruption charges sort of following him around as well. So a fall of this very, very right-wing Israeli government would be sort of a very good positive step. We'll see how that develops, but certainly getting rid of Hamas and sort of ensuring that the Palestinian Authority, and yes, I know probably the Palestinian Authority, but to be honest, massively better than potentially a continuation of a Hamas-run government. Um, but something else I sort of want to sort of enforce today as well. What is the favorability of like Labour members of Keir Starmer? Well, according to a recent survey, it's 4 in 5 members have a favourable rating of Keir Starmer. So you can't be doing all that wrong. And remember, if this is meant to be a big defining issue, it's not affecting Labour in the polls. If it is, it's not exactly that visible. So ultimately, I think Labour's stance on here is the right one. I think it is the correct one. Can they be doing more? Yes. And I think it comes into sort of areas of putting more pressure on America, making sure you sort of stop weapon shipments. That's where I would sort of like to see people really sort of start to look and focus on. And once again, looking at those international solutions, we've already seen those sort of solutions start to form. Um, there was an attempt at something in Qatar very recently. Of course, Israel walked away from those talks. We know that there were secret talks that went on in France not that too long ago. So there is a push by the international community to look towards a more international and way to sort of end this conflict. And I think that is something that we need to sort of which technically there is being said in that one voice, but there needs to be this idea that the language of calling, oh, we need to have an immediate ceasefire. Well, great, but how do you make sure that ceasefire lasts? Because remember, we've already had a ceasefire that lasted for a couple of days, and then we went straight back to square one. How can we ensure that that doesn't happen again? Because that would be yet another tragedy in this unfortunate conflict. So, as always, thank you very much. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. And of course, as always, do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.